Okay, so last week we had some technical difficulties, so not everyone heard Caleb's talk. So if you happen to have some time this week, you should take a listen to it. It's on our website. But we're going to be spending the next handful of weeks talking about discipleship. What does it mean to be a disciple of Jesus? And last week, Caleb talked about how grace is always the engine of discipleship. That the world tells us, be good, then you will be loved. But discipleship says that if you're loved by God, as you realize that love more and more, and as you let God love you, you will become good. So tonight, we're going to talk about humility. And interestingly, humility was not a value in the ancient world. So you don't find it in the writings of Socrates, like ancient Near East culture, Greek culture, really valued debate, using your mind to win arguments. We see a lot of that with Paul, right? Like he's like using arguments to prove his point. Climbing the ranks of power, that was what was valued in that society, not humility. And really, if we think about it, humility is not really valued that much in our society either, outside of like some Christian circles, or in theory, Christians say that humility is a value, right? So why do you think that is? Like, what are some of our hang-ups with humility, the term humility? Anybody can share, online, in person, folks.
Doesn't help you climb the search engine optimization. Yeah, it's, just, you're not going to get famous by being humble.
Yeah, did you guys hear that? Could you guys online hear that?
And if you don't get, since everybody lives online, if you don't get paid attention to, you don't exist.
Okay, yeah.
Like you need to have people paying attention to you online to even exist. Otherwise, you're just a passive observer.
That's really interesting, especially in the time of COVID, where there's so much isolation going on, and a lot of the way that we're communicating with folks is via these online platforms. That is interesting. That if we don't do any of that, will people even know that we exist or that we matter? What else? Hang-ups about humility. Why don't we see it? Yeah.
I think humility is often associated with weakness.
Yeah, what do you mean by that?
It's not there.
Oh, it's not there? I'm trying to turn you up a little bit. Where do I turn?
I can't. I tried to make
it
connect, but I couldn't.
Cool. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that, well, I don't know if that's true, but it seems to me that people that are like bold and confident and like bragging about themselves are seen as strong and successful. And so humility can be associated with weakness.
Yeah, like the people that are kind of famous in our society, it's like people like Elon Musk, who's totally arrogant, at least I think so, or Jeff Bezos, or a lot of the people that are famous or get a lot of recognition are like the go-getters that seize the opportunity, that get the power, make the innovation, get the money, get the fame. Anything else?
I think kind of like off of what you're saying, like I think a lot of times where we see it as like self-deprecation. Like to be humble, you have to be like I don't think it's necessarily a lack of humility to, like as you're applying for a job or something, or like be confident in like your skills and abilities. But I think we tend to think that is not being humble, and that humility is like basically you have to like kind of downplay yourself.
Yeah, it's kind of almost like you have to be self-deprecating. There's maybe an aspect of like making yourself smaller or less than the other person. Yeah, that's good. I think that's totally true. So tonight we're going to explore some of what Jesus has to say about humility, and I'm going to give us a tiny bit of context before we start. In the chapter right before the passage that we're looking at, it's from the Gospel of Matthew, and Matthew writes that Jesus told this to his disciples. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And on the third day, he will be raised." And they were greatly distressed. So he tells the disciples, like, I'm going to die. It's going to be brutal. And they were distressed. And so we come to the passage for tonight, and it's Matthew 18, 1 through 5. And I will read it. Shoot, we didn't print. Did you not print out any passages for tonight?
No, I didn't.
Oh,
It's online.
okay. It's online for those folks that want to look on their phone. It's on our website, I think under the online service, or maybe the main page. I never remember. Okay, but let me read it. So at that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them, and he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never inherit the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position," and in Greek, this is the verb form for humility. So, whoever makes themselves humble, like this child, is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. Some more background info is that the term for child here actually it means like toddler, so very small child, like little tiny, like toddler. Currently in this culture, I would say that we kind of put kids on pedestals more than the ancients did. So my kids probably have well over 100 stuffed animals that my mom has spent who knows how much money on. She's blown so much money on them. And we have these terms like helicopter parents, right? Where above else, we want to keep our children safe and protected and make sure that they feel secure, and we're going to prioritize them. And it implies this hovering nature, right? We've had so many people. We try to give our kids a little bit more freedom. And so I don't know how many people have come up and said, like, your child's like way over there, like, what are you doing? And it's like, actually, this is an intentional choice. But anyway, so helicopter parenting. I grew up playing in a pack and play in the back of a moving van. And now children have to be in 5-point harnesses. Pretty much it's recommended until they're like 7, right? Which is ridiculous. Or they're in that booster seat until they're like 12 or something. It's dependent on weight, but okay, but in the ancient Near East, where social hierarchy was really important, children were considered at the bottom.
Put them in the pack and play.
Yeah, like kind of next to like servants in terms of power and contribution and their voice in society, right? They had no power, nothing to add to the family, and in many ways they were kind of a liability, right? Because it was just an extra mouth to feed, and who knows if they're even going to live to get to adulthood. So of course they were loved, but it was just a very different relationship than the one that we have with children today. So just keep that in mind as you read the passage, because I'm going to give us couple more minutes to read it again if you have your phone. And as you're reading it, make note of any questions that you have or if you have any observations. And I'll give us a minute or two, and then we can start talking about it.
What's the passage again?
It is, yes, good. Matthew 18, 1 through 5.
Or openhome.org,
It's also on our website.
openhomechurch.org online service. I wish I had a phone to read it with.
Where's my phone?
You don't have that, right?
Okay.
I do actually,
Okay.
as well as the whole Bible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
So don't come at me with that.
Wait, what did I say it was?
1 through 5,
From what?
18.
Oh, 18. Thank you. I was looking at 15. I'm like, this is not the passage.
Me too.
Okay. So what, if any, questions do you guys have or observations? Which not, when I say observation, I'm not saying like, this is what I think the passage means, just, I don't know. What's
Something
it?
you noticed.
Something you noticed. And we're not going to answer the questions right now, but I'm going to try to incorporate some of them into the discussion. So what, observations, questions as you read this?
I think one thing I've always wondered about this passage is what does it mean when Jesus says, and whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me? Like, when are you going to be welcoming a random child?
Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah.
It's kind of, one observation I have is it's a little bit reminiscent of, which maybe I shouldn't talk about this because it's a different passage, but later in Matthew when it's like, where were you when I was hungry? Where were you when I was thirsty?
Yeah.
Like, what's the thing that he says? It's very similar language.
God loves
Whatever you do unto the least of these, you do unto me.
When you love somebody, you're loving God too, because God wants people to be loved.
Yeah, but yeah, like what one such child, like what that's weird, that's odd.
I like that he puts the kid down in the center of everybody and has them look at the kid. Like, it's like, slow down, everybody. Like, look at this beautiful little being. Like, let's be like this. You know what I mean? Like, it creates a moment of pause that I think is really beautiful.
Yeah, especially when you think that
Should I
it
go get Goldie and
stems-
put her in the center?
No. Especially when he does that, stemming from this question of like, who's the greatest? And then he puts this little child in there, and there's this pause, and yeah, that's interesting, right? Contrast.
That's kind of the part that cracks me up is the whole thing that starts this is they're arguing over who's the greatest, and they actually go to him and say, hey, who's the greatest?
Yeah,
He's like,
totally.
let me get one for you.
Yeah. Anything else?
It seems, I don't know, it's, reading it tonight, I was just kind of struck by how kind of extreme it is to say, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven unless you're like a toddler.
Totally.
That's pretty intense.
It is intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's intense language. So there's something about this that we should try to understand, basically. Anything else?
I was kind of curious, like, whose kid did he snag?
Totally. Yeah. It is kind of nice, like, to think that there's just children nearby, like that everybody's kind of curious about Jesus and what he's going to say, you know, that maybe potentially the whole town or community is kind of gathered around this guy. Yeah. Alyssa noticed that they say who is the greatest, which is kind of funny. Why are the disciples asking this? Like, what is their intention? Especially when we think about what came before it, which is that Jesus tells them that he's going to die a brutal death. Because that's how the passage starts, right? At that time. I mean, a couple other things happened, but they just had this conversation with Jesus where he says he's going to die. And now they're asking, who is the greatest? So what do you think? Why are they asked? What's the intention behind this? Do you think?
I feel like who's gonna step up into like leading the group or something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. It strikes me as a little bit mean, kind of, maybe a little bit rude. It's like asking like your elderly grandmother, like, who's gonna get this like plate when you die? Who's gonna get this like clock that I really like? Do you know what I mean? Because Jesus just told them he's gonna die. And so I kind of think that some of this discussion is stemming from the fact of like, who's gonna be the next in line? Like, who's gonna get the power then when you're gone, Jesus? right? It seems a little self-involved. And I think that we can say that that's probably true, that there's some of that intention, because now Jesus starts talking about humility, right? But when I was thinking about this, I started thinking, like, how often do we think this way, right? When we look, like, how often, like, when you first go into a room of new people, you look around the room, you start sizing people up, and you kind of start thinking, like, where am I, like, in this equation? Where do I fit on this ladder, right? How can I, even sometimes, if it's academics or sports competitions or whatever, it's like, how can I potentially be better than these people? Our culture puts pressure on us constantly to negotiate ways to increase our status, right? Like, how many followers do you have? Can we afford the house in Seattle near Green Lake? Do we have a Tesla? Who in our peer group is lined up to get the next promotion or make the most money? How many books by Malcolm Gladwell, which I have been reading a lot of those lately, or Brene Brown, like, how many of those have we read, and do people know about it on Goodreads, or, you know, like, who knows what we're reading about? How many of us have a high-waisted pants and detachable prairie collars, which I'm wearing right now? Caleb hates this thing, and he thinks that I'm taking my fashion cues from Handmaid's Tale, but I love it. But honestly, right, clothes for me are this way that I try to distinguish myself, right, when I'm not, like, totally living in my identity as child of God, right? Like, it's a way that I, like, try to stand. Yeah. Many of you probably disagree with this fashion choice, but it's a way that I try to stand out from the pack, right? And so when I was writing this list, I was like, oh my gosh, the Holy Spirit's talking to me right now. Like, I get triggered by all of this competitive BS, right? But if we're always asking ourselves, how can I increase the level of praise or recognition? How can I increase the praise that I'm getting? What are some of the things that happen in the community, internally? What happens when we're always thinking about how can I increase my status?
You lose yourself. You look at whoever's the best at whatever you want to be and compare yourself to that instead of the billions of other people on planet Earth that aren't as good as that person at the thing that you want to be good at.
Mm-hmm.
You're also really focused
You go.
Okay.
Oh yeah, Alyssa. Okay.
We lose focus on other people and loving other people, which is what we're supposed to do. We lose focus on God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When all we're doing is focusing on ourselves.
Totally. When we're always, like, in order to increase our status, it often means that we have to squeeze up the ladder at the expense of other people, right? It turns friends into competitors. And I don't know about you, but whenever I feel like I've risen a rung on the ladder, that satisfaction, like, if I do, well, I'm not in school anymore, but when I was, like, in seminary or college, like, anytime I did it, like, got a really good grade, it's like, oh, or, you know, any time I feel like I've risen a rung, it never lasts for long. I feel awesome for, like, a little tiny bit, and then the same old, like, I'm still the same old person, and so my dissatisfaction starts to rise up in me, or my insecurity, like, it just doesn't go away for long. And so then I just try to climb the ladder again, right? And it's this unhealthy cycle. And what happens if we're always pursuing self-promotion and we make up the church, right? Then the church, and this is kind of what we are seeing, is the church becomes this place where we focus on pampering ourselves and hearing warm, fuzzy messages, and we don't look that much different from the rest of society, right? Except maybe we're just a little bit more judgy. And we become inward focused instead of expanding the kingdom. And instead of asking, how can we love and serve other people, the people around us, we get stuck looking inward, thinking, how can I get ahead? How can I, like, help my ego feel okay? So the disciples ask, who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And in effect, how do we become the greatest? And so here is how Jesus responds. He calls this little toddler to him, places the toddler among them, and says, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little toddlers, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." So, like to Josh's point, Jesus is saying, set who is the greatest aside. You will not even get into the kingdom unless you're like a child, right? So let's explore this idea of what he means by be like a child. What do you think that Jesus is getting at when he tells us to become like children? So what are some attributes of children?
They're very honest and very straightforward, very matter of fact,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
very lovable. I feel like there are all sorts of attributes that are just, I don't know, I'm a preschool teacher.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I see it and
Totally.
I work with toddlers. So I definitely see that, and like hearing this passage, and just like I always have such respect for young kids and love to hear what they have to say on certain topics and things like that, because they really like blow your mind on things, and they're like, oh, I would have never thought of it that way, or like to hear you put it that way, that I'm like, oh, like that makes sense, or yeah, like good job, like that was good, you know?
Yeah, children are really open and have all these like ideas, and then they're so not self-conscious. Like my child, like Goldie could probably run in here totally naked and run out laughing and like feel no shame, right?
Yeah, since Kyle moved in, like I tell her all the time, like you have to wear underwear.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, what else? What other things, what are the other attributes of children?
They need you for everything.
Yeah.
For
Totally.
eating, sleeping, anything, changing.
Yeah.
Everything. And they're fully dependent on it.
Yes, they are
They wanna talk to you all
so
day long.
dependent. Oh yeah, they really, yeah, they.
Oh my god, today I was like getting dizzy from them talking to me so much.
Can you please, like, yeah, you've been, yeah.
I literally said that.
He's been hanging out with the kids a lot this week.
When she leaves this, I'm with the kids and I go crazy.
Yeah, vice versa. Or we all, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're incredibly dependent. They don't think and do not want to face life by themselves. One time I was talking to Clementine and just in passing, I was like, yeah, someday you're gonna like live in a house that's different than ours, right? Without us. And this was like not even that long ago. She got like so distraught that she started crying, right? Children are so content on being dependent, and they look to their parents for food, for entertainment, for routine, for safety, for everything. They're completely dependent. Yeah. What else?
They're learners. They're
Oh, yeah.
paying attention to stuff. Even I've heard about how like kids like repetition because they're testing out theories about cause and effect, because cause and effect isn't like totally situated in their brain yet. So if it happens over and over the same way, they're like, fascinating. Let me try it again. They're like being little scientists. Like, let's see if it happens the same way again, though.
That's why like a kid will like always drop stuff off a table, or it's so annoying when they're in that stage.
But they're
yeah, so they're
way
learners.
more aware and asking questions of their environment and asking why all the time. So like, as we're talking about being disciples, like we're supposed to be these lifelong learners.
And they don't assume, they do not assume that they know everything or anything, right?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
Which is, there's no
Children
way.
are not farsighted.
What do you mean by that? Oh, it's just like whatever's in front of them?
Well, they don't think about the future.
Totally. Yes. Kind of, this is a little bit tangential, but I think that children, because they're not future focused, they're just able to be completely present in the moment. And I think that actually gives them a lot of joy and gratitude. Like they're just content. Like our children played with the cardboard box for like half the day the other day,
Yeah.
right? They'll play with dumb like Happy Meal toys for like hours in the car. It's saved us many a time on road trips. Why are you
I
laughing?
was just imagining God being really pleased with me playing with a cardboard box for half a day.
But everything
I don't
to
know,
a
that's
child
stupid.
seems like a gift. This is tangential, what I'm going to read right now, but Caleb really wanted me to read this, and it is a really good quote. It's a little tangential, and people that, the ladies that read this book, we talked about this quote because it's so good, but, okay, this is from G.K. Chesterton. He imagines that God, I'm just gonna read the quote. Because children have abounding vitality, because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, do it again, and the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony, but perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, do it again to the sun, and every evening, do it again to the moon. It may not be an automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. It may be that he has the eternal appetite of infancy, for we have sinned and grown old, and our Father is younger than we.
I love that.
That's a pretty good quote. It's a little tangential, but
No, it's not.
okay, anyway. Good.
Totally related.
Someone kind of said this, but children, when families are operating well in the way that they're meant to, children know that they're loved, right? They know that they're loved by their parents. So Clementine and Goldie are so confident that they're loved by Caleb and I that they want to perform confusing, plotless plays for us that are way too long. They want to hang up their mediocre drawings on our fridge. They want to show us their terrible dance moves. And they're not wrong. Like, we actually do love all of that, right? Their plays do get a little bit long, and sometimes they talk too much. But children know that they're loved, right? They just know it. Anything else?
They're really trusting.
Yeah, totally.
They take whatever you say as like, you're God.
Yeah.
Yeah. They do not, there's no question that they are like, that there's an authority figure and that they have to listen to the authority figure. And if they don't, things will go bad, right? Even if children were left to their own devices, like there's this one movie that's on Netflix right now, Jennifer Garner. It's called like Yes Day or something. Has anybody seen the preview? It's really funny because the plot is that there's the parents, like, because their family's having a rough time, they're just going to take one day and say yes to their children every time the children ask for something. And then by the end of the day, they're like doing ridiculous stuff like skydiving and like, what else? It was a bunch of funny stuff.
They're like doing a slip and slide down their stairs.
Yeah, like stupid stuff. And Caleb's like, that's pretty much what would happen if like you let a child rule the show, right? Yeah, like children just know that they have to like do what their parents want them to, right? Small children.
They also kind of love unconditionally. Like,
Yeah.
in the short term, they don't even notice that if you lash out at them or
Yeah.
it's like the next day, it's like,
They're very,
Or
very
5 minutes
forgiving.
later.
yeah, exactly.
No, totally. That always like amazes me how forgiving and loving children are. And like small children, they're just like, yeah, they hit, I guess, but like they're like pretty welcoming. You know what I mean? Like they'll kind of like play with anybody. And it's beautiful.
They're like available too. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I would just go around and you knock on someone's doors and you just, can so and so come out and play? It's like they're just they never book a day full of fiends.
Yeah.
Totally. I like that. They're available. They don't got anything going on.
Anything that society
Yeah.
is telling them.
I want to be like that.
Someone was going to say something online.
I was, but I was trying to hear. I'm having a hard time hearing
Oh, sorry.
others.
Sorry.
It's okay.
What were we? Someone was just making a
I
joke.
was just saying that they're not tainted by any like norms or anything like
Yeah.
that. They're just kind of pure in that way.
Yeah, they're innocent. They're not tainted by societal norms. Along those lines, I think that's why, like, children don't care about their status, right? They don't even know what that is because they have not been influenced by our society yet. Children don't care about their status. And I think that is what Jesus is, what's key to what Jesus is getting at here. During Jesus's time, children were low on the social rung. They couldn't do anything about it. They had no social capital or power. So Jesus is saying, you want to be great? Like, unless you turn and abandon your pursuit of upward mobility, of trying to climb the ladder, unless you take this low position like this child and give your life away rather than try to grasp for more, you will miss out on life in the full, right? You're going to miss out on the kingdom of God that is available to you here and now. So don't chase for your honor for yourself. Don't climb the ladder and pull down people who are weaker than you, or pull down people at all, right? Don't play the game. Jesus is saying, like, walk off the field. Don't climb the ladder of upward mobility. Go the opposite direction, right? Change your ways to what Jesus calls in this text the lowly position. So he says, whoever makes themselves humble like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. So humility is not only like a virtue. Jesus is telling us that it's actually really core to life in the kingdom, right? Humility is core to our discipleship. And the working definition of discipleship that Caleb came up with was, discipleship is to become more like Jesus, and through relationship with him, to be led towards your calling in life.
She cleaned that up. It's better now.
It was really convoluted last week.
before.
Discipleship is about becoming like Jesus. And to do that, we need to say, Jesus, like, less of me and more of you. There's no other way to become like Jesus, right? The path to Jesus, AKA discipleship, is one of humility. And it always is. And he says, when you welcome these little ones, you welcome me. He's saying, if you want to be with me, children, and becoming like children is the way. Yeah. And so the humility that Jesus is talking about has nothing to do with self-hatred, right? Or making ourselves like doormats. Looking at our observations about children, humility seems to have something to do with being really dependent on God and trusting that his ideas for our lives are better than our own ideas. Humility has something to do with expressing gratitude and noticing God in the small and the big ways that he's provided for us. Most importantly, humility grows from believing that we are so loved by God, right? That our souls, who we are, is so loved by God that we can be free to be who we are. And we don't need to justify our existence. The mirror of public response doesn't matter. And so we can stop thinking about where we are on the ladder and how we compare, right? So humility doesn't mean that we think less of ourselves. It means that we think about ourselves less often, right? So that we're free to think about other people. I don't know about you, but I really want that freedom. Like, I really want to stop thinking about myself as much as I do. And when we have humility, we can love other people who are also made in the image of God as they actually come to us, right? We can give them honor rather than manipulating them to give us honor, right? So kind of what's fascinating and powerful as I think about this passage is that humility really is like a prerequisite to love, right? And no one taught us this more than Jesus. He's the consummate example of humility and love. Jesus, this is crazy when you think about this. Jesus laid down all of his divine power, all of his authority and greatness, and he literally became a child, a helpless child, right? So it's kind of fascinating that when he's asking us to become like children, like he literally did that, and he was at the mercy of human parents. So Jesus, who had the greatest power, gave it all up to love us, right? He gave up power to die a really embarrassing death, painful death on the cross. You cannot get any more downwardly mobile than Jesus. You just can't. And so if he's asking us to do this and he did it, like, I'm like, yeah, Jesus, like you did this for me. Like, I want to say yes to this. And Jesus showed us to love others no matter the cost to ourselves, right? I was listening to a John Mark Comer sermon, and he was saying that developmental psychologists, there's been these studies done that self-worth is only a function of unconditional love from birth to age 3. So from birth to age 3, the unconditional love of the parent is like what makes them feel really good about themselves. But after 3, the psychologists hypothesize that self-worth becomes a function of contribution to a social group. So for a child to feel happy and confident, at first they need unconditional love from their parents, but for their own well-being, they need to contribute. So they need to do chores, help out around the house, help with the younger siblings, like tie their shoes, just small stuff, right? And I saw this because Clementine gets really pumped and feels really good about herself when she like helps us with small menial tasks. Like she swept the floor the other day and just like felt very, very proud of herself. So this is totally the pattern of discipleship Caleb talked about last week. If you are loved, you will become good. It's not the other way around. And what this means is that we're created by God, not just to receive love, but to give that love away, right? To let God's love flow through us and then out into our communities. The disciples ask, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And John Mark Comer had something really cool to say, so I'm gonna repeat it. He said, notice that Jesus doesn't rebuke the disciples' desire for greatness. Jesus redefines what greatness is. I really like that. So we were all born for greatness, right? Like that's not a bad thing. We all want to matter. I think we all want to make a difference. I think none of us want to just take up space, right? And be another carbon footprint or just a consumer. Like all of us like really do want to leave the world better in some way than we found it, right? It's the human story. We see this so many times in movies. That's probably why superhero movies are so popular. Scripture tells us that we were made for greatness, right? Genesis tells us that we were made to rule and tend all of creation and care for it well. But this desire of greatness is so easily impacted by our sin. So we can so willingly become anything or do anything to anyone to climb the ladder, right? Or because deep down we don't feel like we can become whatever definition of worldly greatness we value, we turn to things that numb our sense of failure, right? Like alcohol, even exercising to get the perfect bod, or like maybe shopping will help. Just we turn to these other things, right, to numb our sense of dissatisfaction. But again, Jesus doesn't rebuke our desire for greatness. He redefines what greatness is. So no matter who we are, I really believe that as we say yes to discipleship with Jesus, all of us really do have the potential to be great. But by Jesus's definition, right? Where it isn't all about status, but it's about love and service. Jesus is telling us that life isn't about how high we can get, where we are in the hierarchy, right? But about how low on the hierarchy we are willing to go to serve. So maybe the life of greatness that God has for me isn't to become some famous, awesome Christian, right? Sadly, maybe and I really do think that this is the lesson. Like for a handful of years now, I feel like this is what Jesus is telling me, that maybe the great life that God has for me involves me humbly cleaning up after my children 20 times a day, right? Or maybe it means learning to apologize to Caleb quickly instead of like sulking around for a while. Maybe the good life for me means cooking for 30 people at open home for dinner after church, right? When we'll do that again. It's what we used to do. Maybe the great life for me involves acknowledging my racism and learning more about systems of oppression that impact our society. Maybe the great life involves spending time with a friend or acquaintance where I ask them more questions about themselves than they ask about me, right? To love even when it's tiring, even when it is not glamorous at all and there's no personal gain to me. Because I believe that if I live with that kind of humility, then I'm going to experience the freedom from the narrative that I'm not enough. I'm gonna experience freedom from the narrative that I always need to be the best, right? If I humbly love the people that God has placed around me, and if I make space to love God and to receive his love like a child, I believe that I'm going to have a great life. Jesus is telling me that I'm going to have a great life, right? A life of joy and hope and love. And don't we want that, right? So I'm going to pray for us. I have some reflection questions on the website. Is it on the web?
Yeah, it's on openhomechurch.org.
Is it just on the
online service?
Oh, under the online service tab? So I'm going to pray for us, and then we're going to have a couple minutes of reflection. And there's some questions on there. There's actually like a lot. There's 4 questions, and we won't have time to think about all of those in depth, but just kind of pick one that seems to resonate with you. And then after we're done with that, we're going to share a little bit in small groups. Cool. Let me pray. Jesus, I am so thankful and just it's like amazing that you never ask us to do something that you weren't willing to do yourself. That you lowered yourself to the very bottom of society when you didn't need to, when you had the most power, the most grandeur, you deserve the most praise, and yet to love us, you made the utmost descent. I pray that we could follow in those footsteps, Jesus, that you would help us. Like, I do want to be free from thinking about myself all the time, thinking about how I measure up, worrying about where I fit in, worrying about how good or how bad I am. Jesus, I want to be free of myself so that I can love you and love other people more. So Jesus, show us how to do that. I pray that you would give us opportunities to exercise humility this week. That you would just make those opportunities really loud so that we can't miss them. And that as we say yes to humility, that you would just really show us yes, this is the way to a good life. That as we love people, we have more love inside of us. We have more joy. Help us to be like little children, Jesus, who trust you, who believe that, yes, the way that you tell us to live is better than the way that we think we should live. That we can be confident in your love like children. That we can be full of gratitude and joy. pray that you would be speaking to us now with some of these reflection questions. Yeah, just be shining like some light into our brain, our hearts. What do you have to say to us? Maybe it's words of love and affirmation. Maybe it's ways that you're calling us to humility. But Jesus, just be speaking to us right now. And yeah, bless this time that we have with you.
God, make us humble. God, give us the freedom of humility. And yeah, just to speak simply about ourselves and be truthful and honest and just loved and not having to worry about it. Yeah. Amen.
Amen. So we're gonna get into small groups for a few minutes.
Yeah.
But maybe we should do the announcement.